My name is Cicero. I am from Greystone Realty, and I'm filling in for Jason Wagner today. We have the Wagner report pulled up, and I would say the most important slide in the PDF or the slideshow here is going to be the last one. That's your opportunity to check the QR code, sign up for the report. And I'll just say a bit about Greystone Realty before I hop in. We have two other brokers here, so Danielle, Jordan are also with the brokerage. Greystone Realty really focuses on agents that also want to invest. So that's the business model behind them. That's how I got to know them. I am a residential agent, so I work primarily in residential sales. Last year, I did just under 11 million in sales, and I got to know Jason last year. I started with Greystone really at the beginning of the year, and have been there now, obviously 4 months. The reason I got connected is in part because of this report. So Jason puts this together every month. It's a market analysis of what's happening here in Chicago. And once again, if you're investing locally, I definitely encourage you to sign up. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and run through the report or attempt to. This is actually my first investor meetup, and I'm speaking to you, so we'll see how it goes. I should say I have a condo that I purchased 2014. That is my only investment property, although my single family home will now become an investment property because of interest rates, which is part of the story here that we'll get into. So the data that you're going to look at here is the rolling 12 months of activity here in Chicago with all properties. At the top, you see median sales price. We're relatively flat on year-over-year change as well as year-to-date. So there hasn't been much movement in terms of pricing here in Chicago. The reason being, and we'll continue to get into this, is low inventory with high interest rates has kind of caused those sales prices to remain flat. Average market time, 68 days currently. That is actually down 8.1%. So properties are selling faster this year than they were last year. And then months of supply, you're up to plus 2.9%. Once again, that's year-to-date change. So 3.6 months of supply is still low. You know, if you think of months of supply, if you're at 6 months, that's an even market. So you're still technically in a seller's market at this point. Under contract, 29,457. Year-over-year change, 24.9% down. So there are less buyers in the market, is what that's telling us. Those of us who are in the business would maybe challenge some of that, saying that there are a number of buyers who are waiting on the sidelines. And so as prices are, or I should say, as properties are priced properly, you have a lot of competition for those specific properties. And so buyers who missed out on that are still definitely out there waiting for their turn. And then new listings, 60,261. Once again, that's the rolling 12 months. That's 17% year-over-year change. And that is once again indicative of the fact that folks who have either lower interest rates or are not carrying a mortgage are not likely to list right now, which is keeping inventory down. As we come into the rental market, asking rents are up. So slightly, not a huge increase there, but you can see that they have increased. At 1669, that's 4.2% increase on year-over-year, and then quarter change of 2.1%. Vacancy rate remains at 5.5%, so not much change there at all. And then multifamily price per unit is $238,034, which is once again slightly up, but nothing that's significant. These are the economic indicators that Jason pulled together to show what's happening in the market. So if you look at the 30-year fixed mortgage rate and then also the consumer price index, you'll see quite a bit of correlation. So as consumer price index is coming down, you also see that mortgage rates are also coming down. These rates should follow. The expectation being that as inflation continues to decrease, eventually mortgage rates will come down. And then that would, of course, affect the market, and we would expect more people to be willing to sell and some more buyers will still be there looking to buy. Median sales price. We talked about this in the initial, I should say, slide, but you can see it's relatively flat. So really, as you get into 2022, median sales price is pretty flat across all three different types of products. You have condos, single families, and then multi-units, 2 to 4 units. Multi-units being the only one that shows a little bit of decrease, but once again, not of significance, right? So you got really pretty much flat in terms of sales price. Months of supply, you can see once again, we're very low overall, with the biggest drop being that of condos. So kind of unique that condos remain fairly flat in terms of the actual sales price, even though the supply was up and now it's come down. That still remains true. Single family homes are up just slightly, but once again, nothing that's of significance. So the summary, prices are flat to slightly down across the entire city. Inventory is near record lows, which provides support to pricing, which is why we haven't seen pricing drop. Sellers are hesitant to list their properties due to the higher trade-up rates. We talked about that. There are much less buyers in the market due to higher rates of affordability, although once again, there's a lot of competition. So once the interest rates come down, I would expect more buyers. And then interest rates are expected to fall as inflation settles down. A couple tips. This is Jason's go-to, but April has historically been the best time to list. So that's one of the reasons we're seeing a slight increase in terms of inventory. And then of course, inventory will remain low, but quality properties priced well are moving, right? And here are the top 5 North Side communities, according to the Wagner report. So you have, for the single family, Avondale, Jason makes the point that they are regularly on the list there. So like the community that definitely warrants some attention. Lakeview is up 15%, East Garfield Park up 12%, Irving Park's up 12%. And then we get to the 2 to 4 units, North Park, North Park, Avondale, and Westridge are also all up. The top 5 South Side median sales prices. One of the big outliers here is Woodlawn. You can see it's up 75%. That is in part because there's a lot of new construction that's happening in Woodlawn. So that's definitely an outlier. Hyde Park is up 30%. Hyde Park has very low inventory, so there's not a lot of sales activity. But when properties do come to market, they usually do sell. Then you have South Chicago, Pullman, and Bridgeport. And then multi-units, you have East Side.
So I am Andy from A&M Mortgage. Sadly, not the A. My tagline I always like to say is I put the A back in A&M. So hopefully you believe that. There is one person in the room who did think that I was the A of A&M, so we'll leave it that way for that person. Thanks, Barry. But I have the pleasure of introducing, like I said, an absolute master in the game. We can tell that you're a master because we're doing 100+ units today, right? Are we buying all those today?
Yes, we're buying all of them today. All of you have to buy 100 units today.
So John, why don't you introduce yourself and then I'll do another couple of housekeeping items.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. A lot of folks I don't know, which is fun. So my name is John Warren. I am the managing broker at Forte Properties. So I run a real estate team. Sharon is the other 1/3 of the 3 people in the team. We sell about $25 to $30 million in residential real estate every year. Primarily in the western suburbs and then the parts of the city that touch the western suburbs, kind of like the Humboldt Park, 606 area, Little Village, McKinley Park, kind of those areas. And then on the ownership side, up to 163 units. And then we manage for some partners and things. So 206 units in total that we manage on a day-to-day basis now. So cool. That keeps us pretty busy.
Thank you for that intro. So there's a few things that Jonathan always likes to start with. As you can tell, Jonathan's not here this week. He's on vacation, so I get to fill in for him. So starting with gratitude, right? Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to our special guest. Thanks to Nina, the owner of A&M, for letting me host this here once a month. She gives the space for free, so thank you, Nina. Jonathan wanted me to remind you that there is a giving portion now of a Chicago Real Estate Investors Meetup. So if any of you wanted the link to that, it is in the Eventbrite link. It's a $10 donation to the Boys and Girls Club. And where are we? Okay, so it's 3 steps to success, John. You'll like this one. So number 3, educate, learn, read. Number 2 is network, which obviously we're doing right now, which is great. And then number 1 is take action. So hopefully you'll give us some actionable items that we can take on today. So we already heard from Lane with the Wagner report. Make sure to get signed up for that. I'll leave the QR code on there. But in the meantime, let's hear from John. So can you give us kind of just a high level view of your business, where you're at? I know you did some of that in the intro already, but can you dig in a little more into Forte Properties and what you do?
Sure. So the brokerage is right around a year old. I started the brokerage because we were doing the management component, and it really needs to be done, in my opinion, for you to be the owner of the brokerage, to do the management company part of it. So I'm the managing broker and owner of Forte Properties. And then the real estate team was already up and running before. So Sharon is on the team with me, one other gentleman, Rudy Yanez. So the 3 of us do a lot of selling of real estate too. We focus on residential. And so that means a lot of 2 to 4 units. That also means, somebody's cousin's single family home that they want to sell. So we do a lot of residential real estate. We do dip our toes occasionally in a commercial. I try not to, but sometimes it's inevitable. And I love working with investors because I am an investor. So I don't personally buy 2 to 4 units, but a lot of my clients have made a lot of money buying 2 to 4 units, single family homes that they live and flip in, house hack. It's great. So that's kind of what I do for my day job, so to speak. And then I also am a very, very active investor, primarily right now with some JV partnerships that I'm doing. So just acquired last year a 30-unit portfolio in the burbs, and we're renovating and fixing violations, pushing rents, doing all the fun things that you do when you buy a portfolio with the intent to refinance. So that's kind of the business model that we do. We buy with either a construction loan, hard money, then normally something that's kind of mismanaged in distress, and then we add the value, which means a lot of sweat, a lot of problems to fix, and then once you get it nice and stabilized, you can put better debt on it, pull all your money out in theory, sometimes not, and then you roll the next one.
That's great. Thanks, John. And it's interesting what you said as well. I feel I started investing because I was working with a lot of investors, and I feel like unless you've got skin in the game and you're having that personal experience, it makes you a better professional. So I appreciate that you're doing the same. So then let's talk about how you got started. So I recently got started December of 22. We closed on 3 units. Ooh, yeah. Thanks partly to this group. So you guys have inspired me to get going and get working on investing. So thank you to everyone here. But how about you, John? How did you get your start?
So like everybody, I read that little purple book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was in grad school for voice performance, which is a really killer degree to not make any money with, in case anybody's interested in being an opera singer. And got towards the end and realized, oh no, what do I do now? And I was in an opera with not the lead role, which is bad. And I was in the library there, just kind of putzing around, looking at things. And I found a couple real estate books. One of the other books that I found there that really got me started was The Complete Guide to Buying and Selling Apartment Buildings, which ironically is not the complete guide. So much information missing, but it had some really good initial information about not buy and hold, but what I would call buy and ladder up, where you buy a property, you add value, you hang on to it with the intent to hold, but when the moment's right, you sell and you trade up into a larger property or larger asset. So that one little nugget I got from that book was really, really valuable and kind of set the stage for how I approached investing for myself. Fast forward to 2015, I was a music teacher at a community college, making not a whole lot of money, and had some bad stuff going on at work, like a lot of people have had. And I got the bug. My wife and I finally were able to buy our first property. Ironically, I was looking, and she was the one that looked at the email for the property we bought, which was a 4-unit. So my first building was a 4-unit, put it under contract, had 10 grand in the bank, it needed 47 grand. And my lender saved the day and figured out how to get it through a cash out refi in my house and a home equity line of credit. I needed both to close. And he kept the other side at bay long enough to pull all that off. So yeah, kudos to him, not me. I really just kind of showed up. So then that was kind of the first property for me in 2015. I got my license right around the same time. As it seems like there's quite a few licensees in here. I thought, man, I can't wait to get all these sweet deals that nobody else is seeing. Got the license, looked at the MLS and was like, wait, it's the same stuff. So, and that happened in 2015. I got it right after I bought the 4-unit.
That's interesting. So John and I have actually never met in person until today. We've known each other quite a while. I didn't realize that you used to be a teacher, because I used to be a teacher as well.
Yeah.
Music as well.
Yeah, I was a music teacher.
Yeah, crazy. So another thing we have in common. So you talked about your first place was the fourplex. So one of the things Jonathan wanted me to ask you is kind of those specific hurdles, or the friction that you found along the way. What was you had any good stories of things that got in your way?
So many good stories. Where do I start? Well, I mean, I think a lot of people want to scale, which is obviously what Jonathan asked me to come talk about, is how to scale. And a lot of people want to do it really quickly. Well, I bought one building in 2015. And then in 2016, my wife and I actually flipped our home to get additional capital because, again, we had no money. So while she was pregnant and actually gave birth in the home, we sold it. Really bad marital advice, but good for investing. And that gave us kind of the next chunk of cash to invest. So we bought a building in 2016 with a partner, and a building in 2017 with a partner. then a building in 2018 with a different partner. In 2019, I bought a building on my own. So for anybody that's hoping to scale really quickly, I know I'm supposed to be the poster boy for how to scale quickly. It's actually kind of slow sometimes and methodical, and that's okay. If it feels like you're thinking all the time about it and barely taking action, but you are taking action regularly, you're doing it right, in my opinion. And then in 2020, I bought 3, and then it just went from there. I bought a lot of buildings after that.
And was there one thing that helped you go? Like you said, is there a specific
Yes,
action software?
I'm gonna say people, so you're all at a networking group, and I think that for me, when I started out, I had one person who was my lender that was kind of an early mentor or a person that gave me the knowledge I need. And as I grew, I would have a partner that would provide a bit of knowledge, a different lender, a contractor, an attorney. You like kind of build your team slowly over time. And sometimes your team members leave, sometimes you have to fire them, but you keep growing your network and you build your team. And you get more and more knowledge and you become more of an expert. There's not really like a book on how to do this, in my opinion, especially for a local investor in Chicago, right? You can read books from maybe bigger pockets, but they're not really location specific. So for me, it's all been people that I've met along the way. That's kind of how I've grown. And so a couple of my friends always laugh at me. Whenever I have a problem, I go, oh, cool, I'm going to text this person. Because the way I think of it now is I have a network of really awesome people I know that have already solved these. I don't have to know how to solve, for instance, financing. That's not really my strong point, but I've got good lenders that know how to solve it. So I call them and say, hey, what do I do to get money back here, get a better loan? So that's how I've approached it.
That's where you plug A&N as well.
Yeah, and that's great. Yeah. By the way, we have done a lot of deals with A&N. They've got some great products.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Bring back that 5% down.
Yes, please. All right, so this is a fun question that John came up with. So if I bump into you at a Starbucks or at the coffee brand, we're not specific, no plugging there, I'm not an affiliate marketer. What's your number one piece of advice that you give to someone?
Is that person trying to scale out? Just really quick. To answer that question. So I know.
Let's keep it focused on real estate, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so real estate focused. I'm gonna still say networking and people, still kind of the same general vein. I think I was kind of going that direction anyway, but I just feel like there's always cheesy sayings like your network is your net worth. It's so true. If you get partners that have more knowledge, that's been really valuable to me. So I would tell a story probably. That's kind of how I explain things to people. In 2018, I met a partner who was very high net worth that had no real estate experience. And we did a deal together that I was the one that was more knowledgeable on. Wasn't that knowledgeable yet, but I thought I was. And he had enough capital to get us through. And the project would have been an absolute disaster if I had the wrong partner. Thank God I had that partner because, man, we had the, at one point we were paying our construction guys about $20,000 to $25,000 a month to keep the project going, like actual cash, not a construction loan. And that would have bankrupted me really quickly. At the other end of that, we got all of our money back because I had the right person on my team, the right partner. So I think if you're trying to grow in this business, you're trying to scale, it's always about what other people you can meet to partner with, and to get value from them and to add value back.
That's great. The common theme I'm hearing here is the right people, right? That seems to be it.
Repetitive, I know, sorry.
No, I think that's great. You're really hitting it home. And one thing I've read and seen a lot is like the person who's just in front of you, right? Like you need to make friends. For me, I need a friend who now has 10 units. I've done 3. I need to, have that vision and that mentorship, right? That's so important. You've touched on this a little bit already, but I want to go back to it. Things to avoid.
Well, I'm really fortunate that I never had any truly bad partners, but I can imagine if you had the wrong partner, it would be awful. Be kind of like marrying the wrong person or something like that. That would be ugly. That would definitely be something to avoid. Other things to avoid right now, I think would be different types of hard money or bridge debt that you don't have a really good plan to get out of. I have 2 in my life. One is about to be retired. It's at 8.5%. If we hold on to it, it goes to like 13. So yeah, that'll be great to say sayonara to that. I think early on, really heavy construction projects. So I think construction is always going to be something you have to do in real estate, but I think that most investors should stick to flooring and paint early on and not try to go all the way. Of course, there's exceptions, but as soon as you open walls, Pandora's box opens on your budget, and that could sink a lot of early investors. Now I open walls very carefully. And I know still that Pandora's box can open, but I can survive it if it did. But I think if you talked to me 5 years ago and some of the deals I'm doing now happened, it would be crushing. So I think it's good to be very cautious, especially here in Chicago. You guys all know the building stock we have. Almost everything has galvanized pipes, undersized electrical services, water services that are lead and duct tape together that the city wants you to do. Sewers that are clay pipe, which so far I haven't had to do one of those, but it'll come. So I think those are things to avoid early on if you're trying to scale, so that it doesn't either stop you completely or completely roadblock you to growing in the future.
That's a great point. I want to pick up on something you said about the hard money side. So, you know, a lot of people worry about coming and talking to a lender too soon. My philosophy is it's never too soon to talk to a lender, even if you're not going to do something for three years. I'd rather talk to you now, explain the documents, explain the process. And then if you don't do anything for 3 years, totally fine. But what I did recently was actually pre-approved someone for a refinance. So before they took the hard money loan, we talked about how to get out of it. So going in with that strategy and, you know, almost being pre-approved for a refinance, which obviously we don't do, it was, you know, really valuable for them. Just, you know, having that plan in place. So, you know, the God forbid happens, you know, you have a way out. So the top tip from me then.
I'll give in a plug a different way. So I think that a lot of times investors that I work with look at lenders as a commodity, the most of any person on your team. I personally think that's a huge mistake. So if you're working with Andy here, and he's pre-approved you for your refinance, he's giving you all this knowledge in the front end. You go use a hard money loan, you do all the work, you get to the other end, and then you call 17 online places to find somebody to kill him and steal $200 from his commission. I think that's a really lousy way to do business. And I would plug a lender like Andy that takes the time to do that. I would try to be loyal to them on the back end at all costs and protect them. So there you go. There's an A&N tip for you.
I didn't ask for that one.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's a pet peeve of mine because I run into it all the time. And it's hard because there is a commodity element to this business. I mean, we feel it as realtors, right? You go to a listing appointment, which I do a lot, and it's like, what's your fee? That's the first thing everybody wants to ask. How can I spend less on you? And my thought process is always, how annoying are you going to be to work with? Normally the ones that are really annoying are the ones trying to get you to do it at a discount. Whereas the people that I work with regularly are the ones that I want to give a discount to because they're fun to talk to anyway. And I think that that's an important thing as you get people on your team to make sure that they know they're protected. One of the gentlemen I talked to earlier was asking me how I find commercial deals. Ironically, I don't have any kind of cool like driving for dollars strategy or direct marketing. It's still people. I talk to a handful of commercial brokers. I make sure they get paid a lot of money when we close. Most recently, I sealed a deal with one guy who's worked with me since I was a total newbie, who I wasted a ton of his time early on. And I was really fortunate to be able to actually pay his commission on our first deal together. So then he knew, hey, I'm paying you. It's not the seller. The seller won't pay you. I got your back. So that's how I've kind of grown on commercial deals too, is I actually don't get a fee when I buy them. I'm making sure the other broker is getting a fee. So
that's so great. And, you know, like you said, we've touched on it many times with building that team, right? It seems to be your key to success.
Yeah, it has been for me, at least as I've kind of figured things out as I've gotten older and hopefully wiser.
Yeah. And you know, I think as a lender, I really appreciate building those connections and doing those repeated deals with people because, you know, they become family, you know, and I do anything for, you know, for any client, but especially those I've worked with before is, you know, being creative, you know, calling underwriters, poking people, chasing things up, you know, will work for you. So, so this is my favorite part of the day now is the Q&A section, because I get to get some steps in because I'm going to run around the room. You're going to stay here.
No steps with me.
So the first thing I'm going to do is run past the air conditioning and turn that up because I am now cold too. So whoever told me earlier they were cold, you were right. But questions, show of hands. I'll run around with the microphone and we'll get you asking questions of John. Listen, yeah, I'm on my way. I'll do you first. I'll do the AC there.
Hi, John. My name is Mike Mahon, local investor. So you talked about partnerships and you talked about building the right team. I guess when you're looking to add people, right, or when you're looking to accomplish a certain task, how do you go about finding those people? And how do you vet, how do you know this person is someone that you want to add to your team?
This is where I'm supposed to have a 17-step process because I'm the presenter. And I'm going to have an embarrassing answer that sort of ties back. Almost everybody on my team has been a referral from someone else. So when I think about, I do primarily agency debt, which is Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae backed commercial loans, which are awesome. Which I didn't even know what they were when I started. And the lender that does those is so much smarter than me, that I'm such a small fish in his pond. He's doing $30 million loans, and I'm doing $1 million loans, which for him is tiny. I got him from my partner in 2019 who was using him. So it was a really easy relationship to build. And I feel like it's been that way for me for everything. If it's a contractor, typically it's like, it's Michael, right? It's like, Michael, who's a painter you've used? And you give me your guy and I try him, and 9 times out of 10, he's all right, because you already liked him. Otherwise, you wouldn't have given me his number. And that's kind of how I've always built, is just organically talking to other people. And they end up giving you other good people that they've worked with. And if you're working with like-minded people, they keep introducing you to more and more like-minded people. Such a cop-out, I know. Sorry.
Next question? Good, yeah, I can run on this.
Hi, Don. My name is Lyons Fargello. I've worked with you briefly in Northeast.
Yeah.
I am looking to scale. My partner and I are upping our marketing. I'm a wholesaler. And as we grow and buy more stuff for ourselves, we find it difficult to organize everything, the mortgages, the water, the utilities, all those things. And I never hear anybody talk about that. So I wanted to know if you had like a tip or trick to keep all that stuff in line. And I'm getting mail saying, the mortgage company traded, you have to, they sold your loan, you have to now do login with somebody else, and that's just been a headache for us. So I need to know what you thought about that. Thanks.
That's really interesting. And these are buy and hold deals that you've done?
Yes.
Okay, so I can definitely help with that. So for me, I'm going to write a book someday about the journey of scaling, because I think nobody talks past. Bigger Pockets does a good job on your first 2 buildings. And then after that, you're like, bon voyage, if you want to keep going. There's a place I call Landlord Hell. For me, that was around 50 units. And it probably is similar for you. It doesn't matter the size of the building, but you have like way too much going on. Too many bills, mortgages transferring. I know exactly the misery. Bills not arriving on time. For me, what really helped me was a recommendation from another one of those people in my life, Mark Ainley, who's helped me a lot of times with, whenever I'm pretty stubborn, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. So I always do things 1 year too long and then give it up. But he told me to hire a virtual assistant, which is really an employee though. The model that I like is hiring somebody 40 hours a week, not going on Upworks and finding somebody to work for 6 hours. I don't know that I would be into that, but I now have 3 virtual team members. And that's really helped me with my business. The reality is you could also do it with somebody locally though, right? So I think what I found on the management side of the business was that at least 60% of it is accounting. And I don't really like accounting. I could probably figure it out, but it's not me. So when I hired a full-time accountant in-house, that was like amazing, because she actually likes doing this kind of stuff, like getting all the bills dialed in. I found out that her and my manager, who's also virtual, have a schedule of all the water bills in some of the towns, and they call the town proactively because the towns screw up and then charge late fees. So they actually call the town on different days to get. I'm like, that's great. Awesome, guys. So it sounds like you're at a bottleneck where you're going to have to hire somebody soon. And that, I think that when you hire them, obviously there's a lot of follow-up things from there, like systems in place. I'll throw 2 more at you really quick to kind of correspond. Have all your bills go to a virtual mailbox. I use traveling mailbox, scans everything. Then your virtual accountant, accounts payable clerk, whoever it is, can pay them without you having to interface with a pile of paperwork on your desk, and then have everything else go to a separate Gmail, alexabills@gmail.com or whatever. And then your virtual employee can categorize everything there and knock it out.
If I can add to that, John, as well. So we had a email address set up even before we bought out those properties. So it's the same email address we always use, and all of us have access to it. So everything from like the closing disclosures, the loan documents, everything is always in that email address. We all have access to it. Maybe a huge difference. Next question. I'm sure there must be other questions in the room. I can pick on some. Okay, thanks.
Nice to meet you. So, as I found myself starting to scale, I come to the area where I'm constantly that's the ratio. So I'm just trying to figure out how to do Maybe somehow that. But, it's,
A really short answer, commercial real estate. I thought I was, to add to that, I thought I was gonna buy 10 4 units when I started. That was my initial goal. Because 4 units are great, you can get residential financing, et cetera, et cetera. Commercial is just so much easier to scale in. It's just so much easier. So I think that that's the struggle, right? You do 2 or 3 or 4 resi deals and they're good buildings. But you have all these roofs and boilers and HVAC systems and just differences. And then you can sell those and buy a 16 or 20 unit. It's all in one place. It's just so much easier. And eventually you get better debt. This is the other thing that I've learned that will be very Chicago specific that may hopefully help somebody here. The small commercial buildings are the ones that I kind of consider to be a trap in a way. So I own 1 6 unit and 1 7 unit. They are and actually an 11 unit too. It's in this. They're just a little bit too small to get really attractive debt. And so they're stuck with unattractive bank debt, works, but 25-year amortizations, 5-year terms. So you have these like nasty balloons that are coming due at all the wrong times. That's what everybody gets scared about with commercial real estate. I actually like the financing better on the bigger buildings. It's way more attractive. We have one loan on a 19 unit that is a 30-year amortization and a 15-year term with 10 years of interest only fixed. That building made me a lot of money last year. A lot more than all the other small buildings that I would have bought. And it will continue to do so for the next 7 years, at which point I have to figure out what I'm doing, but that's a long way out in the future. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, so I mean, and a lot of people here won't have heard of that because Bigger Pockets, interestingly enough, I listened to Scott Trench recently on a podcast and he talked about this. Bigger Pockets focuses on residential, but agency debt is just $1 million or more loans, which you guys probably know, and they're backed by government-backed securities pretty much, right? Some lender helped me. This is where I'm not that smart. I just know how to use the loan. It's like using a saw. I'm like, yeah, cool. But yeah, you do have to be $1 million loan balance or more, and they're non-recourse, which means if things go bad, as long as you don't do anything fraudulent, they just can take the building back, not the rest of your stuff, which is the other thing that's pretty cool as you get into bigger commercial real estate deals. If you want to, maybe you don't want to.
What you're talking about is obviously over $1 million to the agency, right?
$1 million loan, so it ends up being about a $1.5 to $2 million deal. I think on the lowest end, 1.3 for what they call mission driven. Fortunately, all my stuff is mission driven, which just means cheap rents, affordable housing, whatever you want to call it. So it does kind of have to be like around 1.3 million or more. But yes, but a lot of, like in the city, you might have 6 units and things that qualify for that. So it's more about the size of your equity and purchase price and all that than it is the amount of units.
Any more questions? Mr. Goodis, one cell.
Your application process, is it the same across the board? And is there a person that actually takes care of all that? Or are you the person that says yes to everything?
We're talking about for tenant screening right now.
Correct.
So I have a full-time employee that helps with the front end of scheduling showings, pre-screening, picking applications, collecting documents. And then I still review every single one of them before we place them. I stopped briefly and then I immediately started back up after seeing the results. Because Chicago is not landlord friendly. The suburbs are not landlord friendly either anymore. So yeah, those 1 6 to 8 month eviction will teach you to take 5 minutes to look it over. Yeah.
Anyone else? No? Oh,
Okay, quick follow-up. Alan, I'm from San Francisco.
Nice to meet you, Alan.
Nice to meet you finally. So you're using staff to pre-screen everything. What are you looking at for that in that 5 minutes to yay or nay their decisions?
Credit score is still a big deal to me. I know some people say credit score isn't, but I mean, all my lender brethren here will have to agree. 620 minimum credit score. For any of the Chicago folks that are listening in government, it used to be 600, and then they made it even harder to rent to people with lower credit scores, so we upped it. So it's doing the opposite of what they're intending. So 620 minimum credit score, 3 times the rent and gross income, kind of standard stuff that a lot of people look for. Clean rental history, We also verify social media quietly in the background without asking and look for, gang signs, just all kinds of stuff, extra girlfriends, boyfriends aren't disclosed, dogs, packs of Rottweilers, whatever. So yeah, as much information as we can gather in one place, we're looking at, we do the previous two landlords, but we also are starting to think about doing personal references because there's so much fraud. For those of you who are in the city doing rentals, there's an unbelievable uptick in the amount of really sophisticated fraud. And that's why I jumped back in, is being from this area versus a virtual employee. I know like A plus B doesn't add up. Like we just recently had somebody apply from a boarded up building in the west side of Chicago that made $100,000 a year. And I was like, that was on the MLS. It was a foreclosure like a year ago. So it's kind of weird. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
Yeah, the question was, it sounded like the beginning of your answer was the stuff that your assistants,
they collect it all.
they collect all that, and then what are you
Right.
doing in that last?
Well, I think when I look at the credit score, like many of you, a 620 credit score can mean a lot of different things, right? It can mean that you don't have a lot of credit. It could mean that you just went through a bankruptcy, which I've had horrible success with tenants who've had recent bankruptcies. It can mean we recently passed on a tenant who had an okay credit score, but was like, 60% late payments. It's like, oh, I can't. I don't have enough energy in life, We already have enough of those without placing new ones. So I try to look holistically at the whole picture. What I don't have is some sort of a matrix that a VA can do. I've tried to develop one, but I just keep coming back to, I think tenant placement and tenant screening is the single most important thing you do as a manager. You can outsource construction, accounting, pretty much anything else, but if you put the wrong person in, it's just misery. So, hope that helps. That's the depressing side of real estate, right?
A bit more about how you found fraud or what you're seeing as the trends, these kind of rental turnover season right now, speaking to the
So the question was, how are we finding fraud and like what kind of fraud are we seeing? So I'm plugged into a group of investors who own 100 units or more, who self-manage. A couple of them use big management companies, including some companies that have 20, 30,000 units that you'd think are more sophisticated. You'd think. There was one particular person, we don't even know if this is the real name, Tiamara Gardner. So if you see that name, that's the name. This person was in 8 or 9 buildings in one portfolio. It was 4 different communities managed by one professional management company. Somehow they didn't catch the same person in their communities over and over and over again. At the same time, one of my buddies who's a local landlord had that person in Six Flat in Cicero. Somebody else had placed that person in Chicago. And so what these people are doing is they're literally taking your listing description, posting on their Facebook page, and then they're just fraudulently signing the lease and giving you the money. If you're smart enough, you get the money at least, and then they just slam a different person. It's just straight up fraud. So that was the main one that we were on the lookout for. There's also a classic, like out of state. Hey, I'm moving from Michigan. Hey, I'm moving from Texas. They apply and you've got high volume going on and you're not paying attention. And you're like, oh, this person's great. They got like a 780 credit score. They make a lot of money. And then you stop for a second. You're like, wait, has this person ever been here? Like, who is this person? So we started doing something where the leasing agent, which is just me and one other guy, Rudy on the team, verify that we've seen that person. It takes a lot of effort, but we're doing a lot of leasing, but then we just make sure that person's been there. And if they have not been there, we will not lease it to them until they come, which maybe we lose some people from that, but you know what? All good. We'll let somebody else take them. The final one that we're seeing a lot of is just fake. This is harder to spot. I feel like it's really hard to spot, but fake licenses and fake pay stubs and things like that. It's getting very common. Pay stubs are pretty easy to forge, bank statements. So there's just more and more sophisticated people who, man, if they could just apply that work ethic to a real job, they'd be helping, helping the world. But instead, they're really good scam artists. So I guess, I don't know if that answers your question, but there's been a lot of scamming going on.
One thing we found, John, I'm sure you've seen it too, is oversharing to avoid other things. So we had a tenant apply who was way behind on their current rent, but they disclosed that a few years ago they had some financial trouble and they were way behind on their rent, and we've recovered now and we're doing so well, and they were kind of like giving us all this information and all this honesty so that we wouldn't pull the reference from their current landlord, which obviously we did, and they were 12 months behind on their rent at their current place. And evidently they hadn't recovered from while they were telling us. So, it's just, you obviously feel bad with these people, but at the same time, you've got assets to protect. Question?
You mentioned the requirements in terms of screening your tenant, you want them to be current for rent. Curious to know, if you're looking at property, are you also looking for a percentage that 80% of the tenants are paying on time for current or 100%?
Does that mean today or me when I started?
Let's say today, when you started and then today, so I'm curious to know, like, for the progression of.
I love buildings where there's disasters going on, where I can buy them cheap. So we bought a building about a year and a half ago. It was a 13-unit building. I talked about it recently on Straight Up Chicago Investors podcast, and we're about to refinance that. There were 3 units full of gang bangers, it was like just drug dens. I don't even know what to describe these people as, just sad human beings of all varieties. And we had to evict those fully, like they would not negotiate because they were all high and they couldn't go anywhere. We bought it cheap. And that was a fun process to learn. Like, that was the worst I'd done up to that point. I'm sure I'll continue to do tough buildings, but today, as long as I know what I'm getting into, it's not a huge deal because I can calculate what that means, which in Cook County, I think if you're buying somebody, if you do a full eviction, it's between 6 and 8 months if you have a competent attorney to get them out. Potentially less if you do a 60 or 120-day notice as your starting point instead of a 5-day. So if any of you are buying distressed buildings, I don't even go after the money at this point. I could care less. There's no money to be had. You're squeezing, what's the saying, squeezing for water from a turnip or whatever. There's nothing there. But to answer your question, I think a lot of newer investors should be really concerned. Yeah. And especially if you're chasing yield into more marginal areas that you don't feel as comfortable with, and you're hoping these tenants are paying, they may not be paying. And so you have to be ready for that.
2 more questions. Back to you. And we start in the back.
I was just wondering if the 3 crack and how long that would be.
Yeah, so the question is, how long did it take to get all the gangbangers and crackheads out? Longer than it should have. I was too nice 2 years ago still. I didn't have as many battle scars back then. So I did not just start off with an immediate 60-day notice from day one, which I should have done in that building. And then I could have stepped back from there. It was a really rough building. We were planning to gut everything, so I really should have just cleared the building out. It would have gone faster. I believe it took about 8 months for the final one. The really ridiculous thing that happened, we put the wrong address on a 5-day notice and it got kicked back, which lost us about 2 months. So pro tip, make sure you have the right address number, which is not easy in buildings that are mismanaged because there's no unit numbers anyway. So it's like, how do you even know which unit is which? So yeah, I think it took almost 8 months for the worst one. And the sheriff coming out of the pandemic was quite behind too. That was the other thing. We won the eviction a lot more timely than that, but I think it was like 8 weeks or 7 weeks for the sheriff to show up and actually do the deed. So.
All right, we'll do one more question. Here. Hey, John. So you talked about commercial loans being more favorable than residential loans. I mean, I guess from 2 perspectives. From the bank's perspective, how do they know that you're ready to, qualify for that commercial loan experience and financing experience you need? And then from your operations side, when did you feel comfortable kind of jumping from that smaller home, smaller residential to larger home?
I guess I could start with question 2 because it helps to answer question 1. I started in year 2 and I started with a partnership and I was never afraid of it, even though I probably should have been. I just was like, let's go. Let's buy my second acquisition was 20 units in Indiana in South Bend with a partner for $375,000, which is absurd. Yeah. It was a rougher building. We've sold that since then for a profit. It was a learning experience. But I got into it pretty quickly and I always wanted to buy apartment buildings. So I didn't necessarily stay married to the idea of 4 units because it was harder to find them and still is. To answer your first question on how somebody should go about getting into that, I think the hard part is you almost have to start with one of those tweener deals, like a 6 unit or something like that, 5, 6, 7, 8 units, because if you try to jump too fast and you listen to a podcast and you go tell your banker, hey, I'm going to go to 1,000 units, in 3 years, your banker doesn't want to hear that. all they think is, oh no, this guy's gonna get foreclosed on, he's an idiot. They want to hear, I want to put down 25%, make sure the bank is always safe, make sure the bank won't get foreclosed on. So you have to kind of always put yourself in the shoes of the other person. So either you do it with a partner, in my opinion, who has the experience, or you work your way up. Maybe you go from your 3 or 4 unit to your 6 unit. And I think that most local banks, it's a pretty credible move. If you already own a 3 flat, they know you can handle a 6 flat. It's not that hard. It's just a few extra doors. And then if you've owned that for a while, they're going to feel really comfortable with you continuing on from there.
Everything that you did, was anything like subject to, or was it all bank?
So the question is, did I do any subject to financing? I've done literally nothing creative up till now on the acquisition. Yeah, it's all been just boring. 20% down, 25% down. The coolest thing I've done was, we used a hard money lender and put down 15% loan to cost on one of our projects. That's probably the coolest thing I've done so far. So on the construction and the acquisition, but that's not that cool, I know. No subject to, no seller seconds, no seller financing. Nothing really cool, I know. No lease options.
Nice. Oh, do you mind if we'll just wrap it up, and then, John, are you okay to hang around for a while and answer a few more questions?
Yeah, I'm
Cool.
going.
All right, I just have to turn the Zoom off. Well, John, thank you so much. Lots of valuable advice there for me, and I'm sure everyone in the room. Best way to get hold of you?
I would say my cell phone and text, because if you call and I miss you, it'll get buried in my voicemail. So just 847-894-2433. I have a business card, or I can give you my number afterwards.
So that, and then if anybody needs me, business cards and things are over on the table on the way in. We handle both residential and commercial, both as a bank and a broker. So happy to help. There's also Landon over in the corner there. He's my boss. And then Scott over here also works at A&N. Scott's our 203K expert. So those people are looking to buy and renovate. Scott's your man.